Hey, it's Drybear. And today I'm going to help you decide which of the 3 subclasses for Monk in Baldur's Gate 3 is for you. First, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me and the Twitch community, then the next time you make a hot drink, a tea or coffee, you're going to forget about it and leave it. And when you remember, it's going to be too cold to drink. Monk class is one that actually didn't have as much of a strong showing in D&D 5E or 5th edition. It's one of the ones that people were worried about going into Baldur's Gate 3 if it was going to be really good. And the good news is it's actually insanely strong. All of the subclasses are improved and very, very powerful. You can get some really strong builds coming out of Monk. So the question becomes, which of the subclasses do you want? Your options are the Way of Shadow, which is a dark monk, almost like a ninja. You have the Way of Open Palm, which is your true martial artist focusing on unarmed attacks. And then you have the Way of the Four Elements, which is essentially the avatar that focuses on monk-specific spell casting and spell damage. And they all have different styles and ways of playing. There's different ways you can multi-class these into other classes as well, and ways you can build them. And I've actually loved playing Four Elements as a pure caster for Monk, as well as doing more of a strength, wisdom focused tavern brawler build with Monk doing hundreds of damage per turn, and then multi-classing with Way of Shadow to make kind of a ninja darkness key focused ability. But there's some things about Monk that you want to know before you pick your main subclass. Firstly is that monks operate on a special resource called key, and every level you put into Monk gives you an additional key point, which means that you benefit from having more and more levels into Monk, so that eventually you do have a good number of key points to have available and spend. And generally, it's not as good to spend only a couple levels going into Monk unless you don't really intend on using the key points here. And this is very useful, especially for builds like Way of the Four Elements, where all of your spell casting cost key points in order to use. So when you're making your choice of class and possible multi-class, keep this in mind, that you do want to think about how many key points you'll have available, how many levels in Monk you'll require, and generally how that's going to fit in your total build. Now, to make this choice easier, I've laid out the different progression elements that Monk will get. And I think it's helpful to identify which of the items that you get every single level are Monk specific, means that they're agnostic of whatever subclass you pick. All monks get these items every single level as they go up. And that way it's easier to identify what the difference is for the subclasses themselves. You can very easily see that you're getting key points, you're getting unarmored movement, you're increasing your movement distance every turn, and you're getting tons of bonuses that are monk specific. And then when we look at the subclasses themselves, it's a lot easier to understand what makes them different from each other. And when it comes to the Way of Shadow, you get most of what you need from the Way of Shadow at level 6 with Shadow Step, Cloak of Shadows, and then all of the shadow art bonuses that you have, like having thief or rogue specifics, like being able to hide as a bonus action, things like that, dropping darkness. And you also get Shadow Step, where you can teleport from one dark or obscured area to another, which gives a lot of really nice, interesting aspects to the Way of Shadow. Open Palm gets a lot of its value by level 6 as well, because you can get Fury of Blows, Topple, Stagger, Push, which replaces your base level 1 monk Fury of Blows and gives you options to apply CC to those effects as well, which is awesome. And then at level 6, they get Manifestation of Body, Mind, and Soul, which allows your unarmed attacks to gain a specific elemental damage bonus, which means if you're doing lots of extra unarmed attacks, you get more damage out of it, and it allows you to get really, really strong with just basic unarmed attacks. However, I would recommend, if you're going to go 4 elements, that you probably want to go all the way up to at least level 11, if not level 9 instead. And the reason for this is that, kind of like Wizard and most spellcasters, you get your best spells the more points you put into it. And on top of that, Way of Four Elements costs a lot of key to cast really good spells. And so as you push further and further down, you'll get more and more key every level, as you can see by the far left corner. And it's a Drybear video. I'm going to put this image, this little list here, as a one sheet that you can use for reference for Monk down below in the description, so you can have it on your screen if you're trying to decide what Monk subclass you want to go with. Now let's take a look at the abilities and how they're utilized, starting with Way of Shadow. I love this ninja style shadow build for Monk. They get tons of really cool options. They can silence with shadow art, which is very useful. You can do a large AoE silence. Anyone inside can't cast spells, especially if you're inside. You don't really need to cast spells unless you're doing a spell casting multi-class setup, and you can very easily get in range, do Fury of Blows, do some extra damage. And I actually do love running the Way of Shadow multi-classed into more martial styled classes like War Cleric or possibly even like Assassin Rogue, because it gives you the ability to play off the shadow bonuses of the Way of Shadow and also still use weapons rather than going full unarmed like you probably would want to with the Way of the Open Palm. And one thing I want to make you aware of that is core to the Monk kit is the Patient Defense and Step of the Wind. These are incredibly useful and you want to take advantage of them as well. These are bonus actions that cost you a bonus action plus a key point, and you get them at level 2 when you level up your Monk. But what's great about these is normally, say you want to disengage from a target without triggering an opportunity attack, this would take an action. This is built into every character in the game. Any character can use them. However, monks get a special version of this called Step of the Wind. They can use a bonus action instead, plus a key point, and it allows them to disengage instead, and jump no longer requires a bonus action while this is active. So you can very easily activate Step of the Wind disengage, get away without triggering an opportunity attack, and then jump somewhere to get elevation or get down and get value out of that. And the same goes for Step of the Wind dash. You can activate this, it'll give you dash, and then it'll allow you again to jump without a bonus action. So you get extra movement that turn, and you can jump as well, which gives you a lot of extra movement on top of your base kit movement that you have with Monk overall. Now, by far, one of the best skills for Way of Shadow is going to be Shadow Step. If you are standing in an area that is lightly or heavily obscured, you can activate Shadow Step as a bonus action and teleport up to 18 meters away to another area that is also lightly or heavily obscured. So if you're inside of an area here and you are hiding or even just kind of going to a dark area, this becomes available. So you can see that I'm here in this lightly obscured area, and I can choose a location as long as that location is actually obscured. So you can see if I step outside of this shadow, nothing works. So if we zoom in here, you can see in the shadow, it works. Outside the shadow, it doesn't. So you have to go from shadow to shadow if you're using Shadow Step, which makes sense. But what's awesome about this is if you don't have any dark areas that are around, you can create your own. Any area that is obscured counts for this. So you can even use Fog Cloud or create darkness. And then when you Shadow Step, you can very easily Shadow Step from area to area. Now, there's some Shar gear in the game that's super useful for this because it makes you immune to being blind and allows you to create darkness as well. So by default, Way of Shadow will get blinded in their own darkness. However, if you run the Shar gear that you get through the story, you can be immune to blindness and start going from area to area doing whatever it is that you want. And if you're ever wondering, there is a handy dandy icon on your cursor when you're holding shift down, so you can actually see whether an area is heavily, lightly, or not obscured at all. And this is the sun icon next to your cursor. If it's fully lit up, it'll be a full sun with a solid center in the middle. If it's partially obscured, it'll have a half sun. And if it's dark, super dark, very obscured, it'll be empty in the middle, hollow in the middle, showing you how that darkness is shown up. You also don't want to sleep on some of the base monk abilities that you get as part of being a monk, things like Stunning Strike. If you go all the way up and unlock this ability, it gives you the ability to stun the target, which takes their turn away, and you can get some extra damage off that as well, which is super useful. And Shadow Monks can also use Cloak of Shadows, which means if you're completely obscured and hidden, you can activate Cloak of Shadows to become invisible, and then you can channel this and walk around. It's a free invisibility cast. It just costs an action for the turn. It doesn't have any key point association. So unlike other characters that have to use an invisibility potion or things like that, if you go into the shadows and you're obscured enough, you can activate Cloak of Shadows and you can move around within that without revealing yourself, which means enemies don't know where you went. You can reposition and do other things. Just note that if you do become lightly or fully lit up, your concentration on that will end and you'll reveal yourself. But as long as you're in the shadows as a Way of Shadow monk, you can make yourself invisible and move around freely. And if you decide to go all the way to level 11 with Way of Shadow, you gain access to Shadow Strike unarmed and Shadow Strike with weapon, which gives you a bunch of damage from stealth and uses a whole bunch of keys. You can very easily use this on a living target, do tons of damage, and get that teleportation on it as well, which is really cool. Now let's talk about the Way of Open Palm, which boasts possibly one of the strongest builds in the entire game of Baldur's Gate 3 as it stands right now, with just pure unarmed attacks. Way of Open Palm focuses on the monk unarmed attack focus, and there's some really nice additions you can add to this to make it even stronger. So by default, they have powerful unarmed attacks. However, there are some things you can add to this to make it even stronger. Namely, the Tavern Brawler feat. When you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or throw something, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls. And so what you do with Way of Open Palm as one of the possible build options is you run Tavern Brawler and increase your strength. The modifier that you get from strength gets added twice to your unarmed attacks, and you just run no weapon and you punch everyone to death. On top of that, they get the manifestation of soul, mind, and body, which means they can add bonus elemental damage to their unarmed attacks. So you can very easily get your base unarmed attacks without any weapon equipped to do ridiculous amounts of damage. And you can also run Rogue with Thief to get a bonus action added to your toolkit every turn, which means you can do another punch. You get extra attack, which means you can do another punch. Some people even do Action Surge on Fighter to do another set of punches, and you can very easily do hundreds of damage every single turn. I'm working on a build for this specific style of play, so look forward to that on my channel, but that's kind of what you will look for. On top of gear, there's tons of really cool options in the game that allow you to add elemental damage to your unarmed attacks, which makes this build even stronger. And there's even some gear in the game that allows you to add your wisdom modifier to your unarmed attacks as well. And you'll see tons of these in the game scattered throughout, so you get some really cool options for the Way of Open Hand. The Way of Open Palm also has Patient Defense and Step of the Wind that you want to take full advantage of as well. And there is gear as well you can find in Act 3 that allows you to get Blade Ward or Advantage when you use these, and makes it even cooler when you have on top of that and put those three together, and you're really cooking with fire there. On top of that, you have Flurry of Blows with CC attached to it. This still allows you to do multiple attacks rather than the base that gives it. So you have the multiple hits there, and then you add a CC to it. So Stagger on Flurry of Blows, you can do Topple, which knocks them prone. And you can also push them away to deal damage to them and knock them off a cliff to knock them into the void or a chasm and kill them instantly as well, which, as you can see, because you have so many bonuses on all of your unarmed attacks, can very easily add up to a large amount of damage. And at level 9, if you take Way of Open Palm all the way there, this is where you'll start seeing some really cool AoE options pop up. You unlock Key Resonation, Blast, and or Key Resonation Punch, and Punch bonus action. What this does is that any target that you hit with Key Resonation will have this debuff attached to them. They'll have this resonation, they'll start glowing and vibrating and having that on them. Then if you use Key Resonation Blast on a target, any target in the area that's resonating will take damage from this as well, which gives you this ability to hit a bunch of targets and punch them, make them resonate, and then you pop the resonation blast, which makes them all explode and do tons of extra damage on top, which means you can go Monk, Way of Open Palm to 9, and then Rogue, Thief level 3, still have this AoE option and still get the bonus action from Thief as well. And lastly, you have one of my favorite play styles in D&D and Baldur's Gate 3, which is the Way of the Four Elements Monk. I love this a lot because you get to be a unarmed, dexterous fighter while still having tons of unique and interesting spells that you can activate as well. And as a purist, it's super fun to have these. Now, these icons share the icons that you'll see from wizards and sorcerers, so you can recognize what it does, but you'll notice that it is have a different name on it, and that's just so you can use key points for it, and you can also use different stats for scaling it as well. You have Ice Knife, which is Blade of Rime with nice scaling on top of it. You have your Ray of Frost, your Chill of the Mountain. Fangs of the Fire Snake allows you to shoot a fire projectile, and then afterwards your melee attacks deal fire damage. So you can use an action and a key point to shoot Fangs of the Fire Snake, and then you can use your unarmed attacks, especially if you add Thief to the bunch, and do bonus damage on those punches as well. Fist of Four Thunders is Thunder Wave. You can knock enemies away, but if you really want to knock them away, you can use Fist of Unbroken Air, which is a ranged attack air punch that knocks them 6 meters away and knocks them prone. So you can easily, from a distance, knock some off a cliff and kill them that way as well. They also have the Rush of Wind, the Rush of the Gale Spirits, which is 5 meter knockback and off balance with CC on it as well. Shaping of the Ice creates a climbable ice cube in the area, which you can use to get elevation. You can block doorways with this. You can even create some icy areas on top of it. There's a lot of really fun usages for this. And they have chromatic orb that only does thunder and possibly creates a surface on impact. You have burning hands called Sweeping Cinder Strike. You have Shocking Grasp, Touch of the Storm, and you have one of my favorites, Water Whip, which comes with 3 different variants. You can pull someone towards you, or you can knock them prone and deal bludgeoning damage to them at the same time. And once you hit way of the 4 elements all the way to level 6, you'll unlock higher level spells. So you'll be able to add in a spell from the spell list you already had for the monk elemental spells, but you'll also get Shatter, Embrace of the Inferno, which is Scorching Rays, and you also get Hold Person, which is a wisdom save with concentration. So you actually get Hold Person, a monk variant of it that costs key points as well instead of a spell slot. You can do Scorching Ray and do tons of fire damage to a target, or you can do Shatter in a big AoE with Gong of the Summit. At level 9, you get Improved Elemental Casting, and this is when things get really fun for Way of the 4 Elements. This makes it so your Clench of the North Wind can be held on 2 different targets instead of 1. It won't give you the double cast like you can with twinned casting or those sorts of things, but it means that you can cast Hold Person, Clench of the North Wind, on one person and then another, and you can have Hold Person on both of them. And it also makes your Embrace of your Inferno, which is your Scorching Ray, cast an additional Fire Ray. And this is just passive for you once you hit level 9. And in true caster form, if you take your class all the way to level 11, you'll unlock the final, most ultimate version of spells available to Way of the 4 Elements in the form of Ride the Wind, which is until long rest, you gain the ability to fly, although it is concentration. You can get Gaseous Form, which is Mist Stance. You transform into a mist cloud, you can't fall, and you fit through small openings, and you have advantage on con, dex, and strength saving throws. And lastly, one of my favorite spells in the game is essentially Fireball, Flames of the Phoenix. So for 4 key points, a melee-focused caster with the monk can cast Fireball and do fire damage in an AoE. It's crazy. Not only that, but they can also, without having to short rest, they can recover some of their ki, which the other 2 versions of monk do not have. But I absolutely love the animations and the visual effects that you have for all of the spell casting you get for monk. The fact that they all have their own style and movement and glow. The fact that you can create these and do all kinds of really cool, fun abilities with your monk and then add this into it, which provides a very interesting and fun playstyle, in my opinion, in general, because you can just do some really, really cool things with it. So those are the 3 subclasses for monk. I hope this helps you decide on which ones to go for, and I will be working on some monk guides for specific builds that go over the individual subclasses as well. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and I'll see you on my live stream. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.